Welcome, welcome. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Please turn your attention to our interpretation team.
Buen día a todos. Soy Lars y junto con Erwin representamos la Cooperativa de Justicia del Lenguaje Tilde. Estaremos ofreciendo interpretación simultánea entre el inglés y el español hoy. Hello everyone, my name is Lars, and together with Erwin, we represent the Tilde Language Justice Cooperative. We will be providing simultaneous interpretation in English and Spanish today. Esta sesión será bilingüe. Si usted domina ambos el inglés y el español, no tiene que hacer nada. Pero si prefiere el español, por favor seleccione el canal de español. Si usa una computadora, haga clic en el globito con interpretación. O si está usando la aplicación de Zoom en su teléfono o tableta, haga clic en los tres puntitos, luego interpretación de idiomas, luego español y finalizado. Desafortunadamente no se puede acceder a la interpretación a través de los Chromebooks ni aparatos de Linux. The session will be held bilingually. If you are comfortable with both Spanish and English, you don't need to do anything. But if you prefer to use English, please make sure to select the English channel. If you're using a computer, click on the globe icon that says Interpretation. Or if you're using the Zoom app on your phone or tablet, click on the three dots, then Language Interpretation, then English, then Done. Interpretation is unfortunately not available on Chromebooks or Linux-based devices. Unos breves recordatorios para que promovamos juntos un espacio de la justicia del lenguaje. Por favor, silencie su micrófono cuando no esté hablando. Si no domina el inglés, sintoniza la interpretación con sus controles de Zoom para participar plenamente. Y si sintoniza un canal de lenguaje, favor de hablar solamente el idioma de tal canal. Pedimos también a todas las presentadoras y presentadores que hablen claro y despacio, especialmente si están leyendo. Y favor de hablar solo un idioma por intervención o frase. A couple quick reminders to help us build a space of language justice together. Please mute your mic when you're not speaking. If you're not comfortable communicating in Spanish, be sure to connect to an interpretation channel so you can participate fully. And if you do join a language channel, please only speak that language. We also ask all presenters to speak slowly and clearly, especially if you're reading. And please also speak only one language per intervention or sentence. Gracias por ayudarnos a crear este espacio multilingüe. Thanks for helping us create this multilingual space. Over to you.
Thank you so much for that. Hello and welcome again to the 5th annual National Prevention Town Hall. I am LaVon Morris Grant, Director of Community Engagement with the National Resource Center on Domestic Violence. So once again, welcome. At this time, please welcome Nish Newton. They are from the Idaho Coalition Against Sexual and Domestic Violence and Black Liberation Collective, who will open the space for us today. Welcome, Nish.
Thank you, LaVon. Thank you for welcoming us. And as well, thank you to the people who are providing interpretation so that we can all have more access to trade stories and learn and get inspired and connect with different change makers in the mountain region. My name is Nish Newton, and I'm one of the folks on this 2-day events planning committee who helped to envision and develop this space alongside NRCDV, which is an acronym that represents the National Resource Center on Domestic Violence. And please note that I use they and them pronouns as indicated on my Zoom info. So that means I invite you to use my name when you refer to me, or to say gender-free language like they are speaking, so I'm tuning into them and learning from their words. You can also use gender-free terms to refer to me, like saying person instead of woman or man, folks instead of ladies and gentlemen, and sibling or relative instead of a sister or brother of yours in our beloved community of change makers. If you use pronouns or want us to only refer to you by name, please take a moment to do so on Zoom or to let us know in the chat box, because we've co-created a space where all of us can bring in all of us, offering our whole selves and our authentic selves. So it's important for us to use affirming language regarding to gender identity for myself and each of the incredible individuals joining this town hall. And speaking of the incredible people joining this town hall, I want to go ahead and talk about who's here and what we're getting into together today. So for context, if you just eagerly signed up, I want to make sure we all know that we're gathering as part of one of a 2-day town hall dedicated to uplifting the wisdom and the brilliance of the mountain region. So people from across the nation and across the entire world are tuning in to learn from this event. You're each invited to take notes, to join us for both days, to join us for just one of the days, or to stay as long as you can. And if you need to eat, eat. If you need to take a bio break, take a bio break. Stream attentively as you're scribbling down ideas in a doc, or join us like this is a podcast as you're going on about your day. We want you to be comfortable. We just want you to be here with us and for us to be here with you. During our time together, we're going to be discussing many things during our 2-hour session. And again on day 2 with some new folks, some new change makers. And we're really going to be turning a lot of our discussion to the prevention of violence. We're positing ourselves around the question, what does prevention look like when it's rooted in community, with our people, with our culture, outside of systems? And as we continue to navigate the impact of COVID and the many related shifts we've been experiencing the last few years, our values have transformed and our strategies must too. So this National Prevention Town Hall is going to feature approaches from change makers and caretakers in Arizona, Colorado, Idaho, Montana, Nevada, New Mexico, Utah, Wyoming, and the surrounding area, but know and trust that these lessons are going to expand far beyond. Each of the speakers that we've curated from this mountain region will introduce themselves today and share their organizing strategies. And I want to give a big thanks to each of them in advance for participating and sharing their tools and their reflections and modeling what's leading us all closer to our safety and our thriving and our collective liberation. So today, we're basically going to be like people who are touring in a museum. And the museum that we're sharing today is a space of liberation and social change. And all of the organizers presenting are allowing us to just have a quick glance into their gallery of their recent strategies and their recent outcomes. And before I get into it, I also have to share some gratitude for the other folks on the planning committee who found each of these speakers and each of these organizers. So big gratitude to each of y'all. And of course, lots of gratitude to the time and energy y'all poured into developing this space. Now, my next round of gratitude is actually connected well with the grounding practice I wanted to do for today's opening. So rather than continuing on with my little opening thank you speech, I'm gonna begin my next acknowledgements and appreciations by pouring some libation. So in this practice, I'm going to call in gratitude as I pour libations in honor of that gratitude. And I invite my Black relatives to say ashe, or my other relatives to whisper to themselves, and so it will be, or to mentally say thank you, or to simply have a brief pause to recognize appreciation. And since we are each other's harvest, I quite literally have some seeds, I have some collard greens that I'm going to put into some dirt while I pour these libations. So the libations is feeding something. So it's going to ground us in space together, but it's quite literally going to feed our people. So if that's not a good way to start this space, I don't know what is. So for this first round of libations, I want to go ahead and give gratitude and plant seeds of gratitude for each of y'all's fine selves participating. I know that we live in omnipresent chaos and that we're holding a lot of things in this wild world, from the injustices in the Congo and Palestine, and Sudan, and Haiti and New Orleans and Oakland and Tacoma and beyond and beyond. And it's a really beautiful moment to be here with you all, despite the many other injustices and many other places that we could be focusing on right now. So to you, I offer my gratitude, my well wishes, and it's my hope that we make it through this workshop well, with ease and support, and that we can live into a world like our lives depend on it until we all live well. I pour water and I say ashe. I next want to offer some seeds for the folks who want to be here or would be here, but they can't because they're at the front lines of our movements. I put these seeds into the dirt. And I feel immense gratitude for the social change that these folks are holding so that we can be here learning while they're actively protecting us. And to each of them, I offer gratitude in hopes of transformative justice that can allow them to put down their superhero capes and their armor and whatever they wear to be the beacons of our justice today. May we work with them so that we're working them out of a job so that they can live a soft life with spaciousness. I pour libations and say ashe. I also want to honor the folks who want to be here or would want to be here, but cannot be here today because of the systemic bars that we're all privileged to avoid today. So in this moment, I'm especially thinking about the folks who were incarcerated or detained by the prison industrial complex, or the people who were taken from us far too soon by state-sanctioned violence. I offer my gratitude, and I hope that we each remember them today and in each of the spaces that we enter. I pour these libations and I say ashe. I also want to take an opportunity to give some love and libations to my Black ancestors too. I offer my gratitude and I vow to right the wrongs posed by chattel slavery and racism and white supremacy. And we commit ourselves in this space to Black joy and abundance. I pour these seeds, libations, and I say ashe. And to those who do not have the benefit and delight of having Black past parents, I want to offer gratitude to our collective past parents and the freedom fighters who came before us. These people taught us what we know now, and they likely ignited a flame inside of us that brought us each to this event. So they are courageous and tenacious and always with us, and I offer my gratitude and hopes that they feel our celebration, but also our commitments to provide for our collective descendants. I pour libations and I say ashe. And of course, lastly, but certainly far from least, I want to go ahead and offer my final seeds and gratitude to honor the Indigenous life that we each benefit from. Colonization has done unspeakable violence to Indigenous lands and peoples, and this is not a past tense occurrence by any means. We're very likely all tuning in on Zoom from stolen lands, so even if we're at home on Zoom, it's very likely that we're perpetuating the violence of colonization. And even if we know terms like decolonization, a lot of us are still complicit in the ongoing death of Indigenous land and people and culture. So if you know the name of the lands that you're occupying, I want you to offer that honor and action to Indigenous life of the area you're in as I pour these libations. And if you don't know who stewarded the land that you're on before this area was called something differently, before a colonizer who forcefully rebranded it, I want you to go ahead and at least begin there by the end of today. Together, we acknowledge the history of Indigenous brilliance and honor these ancient lineages, as well as those who were stolen or made to flee their sovereign land due to colonization and genocide and war. And we offer our unwavering solidarity in hopes that we embody a way of life that recognizes colonization as just a tiny blip in time, rather than viewing Indigenous sovereignty as a blip in time. I pour these seeds and libations, and I say ashe. These libations, this gratitude practice, is not a formality or a feel-good gesture to open our event. It's a starting point for our critical conversations and the many intentions that we have in this space. So Before we begin our conversations and kick off the event, I just want to take a final moment for a few breaths because I know that a whole bunch of truth and energy just entered the space as we poured libations and planted these seeds, metaphorically and literally, and I want them to settle in. So I invite you to find the earth beneath you, even if that's through your shoes or through the floor or a couple of floors. And I invite you to roll your shoulders back. They're not earrings. I invite you to relax your jaw and to let your tongue fall from the top of your mouth if that's how it currently is. And I invite you to shift your weight around if you can feel yourself be more comfortable. And when you inhale, I want you to imagine yourself taking in all of the love and the power and possibilities of the folks who are here with us. I want you to hold that breath as then exhale it to release all of the other things that might have happened today or that might be mentally or spiritually dwelling. And take a moment, take another deep breath in from your low belly, as low as you can go, and breathe in some wonder. I want you to hold that curiosity for a moment and exhale out any worry that you have about time or perfection or obligation, and let that breath leave you. And keep inhaling and exhaling at your own pace, bringing in what you need and letting out what does not serve you here. And to focus on our time together. Shift your attention, because when we're present, we can find a lot of amazing information and connections and inspiration. So continue to breathe and give yourself grace if your mind is spinning or if you're a little suspicious of my calming juju practices. And tap into the self that you are when you're your best, most loving, and most empowered self. Keep breathing and shift your attention back to each of us in Zoom, and know that you can always come back to your breath to reground. But with no further delay, let's get this event going. I know that there's a couple folks moderating the chat box, but please note that most of the discussion with us as participants will take place at the end of our presentations during the panel discussion. So I'm gonna go ahead and turn it back over to Lavon. But again, I wanna offer my gratitude and I want to thank you for allowing me to open today's space with some gratitude and with some grounding.
Wow. Thank you, Nish, for that awesome welcome and bringing everyone into the space. Thank you so much. Now we will move to today's gallery tour of programs featuring the Wind River Youth Summit, EquitableCC, Dove Denver, and Jackson Hole Latina Empowerment Circle. Each program will offer a brief presentation, and afterwards we will engage the speakers in a panel discussion. So have your questions ready. Please refer to the event program for full speaker bios and program descriptions. If you have any questions to pose to the panel as you move through the gallery tour, please feel free to share those in the chat. We truly welcome that. Live graphic illustration will be provided by Andre Medina of the On the Right Mind of Women of Color-Owned Small Business that provides graphic recording and strategic illustration to organizations and movements working towards social justice and creating a world where we all thrive. You can view Andre's art as we move through our time together today, and we will be sure to share this illustration with all participants. At this time, please join me in welcoming Phil Stephen and Celeste Spoonhunter from the Healing in the Wind River Youth Summit of Wyoming. Thank you, and welcome Phil and Celeste.
And then we'll go through the slides.
Okay. We're going to do introduction, right?
Yeah.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome. Would like to introduce myself. My name is Phil Stevens. I'm from the Navajo reservations, but I've been up here in Wind River reservations, and then I'll go ahead and turn it over to my.
Niakat, not ne his nanana not hise. Good morning, everybody. My name is Sue Woman, but my English name is Celeste Spoonhunter, and I join along with Phil Stevens of helping coordinate and have the summit for the youth back in, was it July?
June.
June, I mean, the Healing in the Wind River Youth Summit. And I am from here, Wyoming Wind River Reservation. I am of the Northern Arapaho tribe. And along with my career, I have many years of experience working in the schools, along with working with our youth here on the Wind River Reservation with many programs and events. And this is just one highlight of our summer that we've held for the youth, the summit. Thank you.
So how we came about the conference that we had during the summer is we organized a coalition here at my work, and we got different people from different programs to join us in the coalition, and we decided to have a summit. So we planned a summit for the summer at Wyoming Indian High School, which was back in June, and we all came together and we brought in some other facilitators from different states, the elders, and then we invited the local elders too. So to tell stories, and what else did we do now?
The summit did focus, like Phil had mentioned, on the strategies to address like suicide prevention, teen dating violence, and many more important topics for our youth. We can talk about the slides. Go back to the
Okay.
person.
So we're gonna go to the slides now. Go back to the beginning. I think let's see. So that's me right there. That was our logo, that the ones that we did. We had a local artist do our logo too. So so we all came together. Yeah, next. That's one of our facilitator right there, Theta New Breast, and then some local counselors. And as you can see, me and Celeste there, and then one of our elders that did the opening prayer. So we opened up each day with opening prayers and honor song. So that is one of our indigenous ways of healing. We have to always, just like Nisha talked about, what she did. I mean, us indigenous people, every waking hours, every day, we do an offering, which is like, we do our prayer, we do our smudging in our home. So next, see what we got.
And adding on to that, with each day, we as Indigenous people like to start our days with the ceremony. When Phil talk about the smudging, we will smudge off with the cedar. We'll have a cedering ceremony, and that entails with our elders for helping our youth to set the tone for their day, that things would go good, and that their learning experiences would be, taking within them, and them carrying on with helping themselves in whatever they do in their lives, in their young lives. So that's something we carry on, and here in the picture we have our one of our facilitators, our presenters, Theta Newbreast, and along with her we have a fellow named Josh Crocker. They're both from the Native Wellness from outside of, where are they from?
Different
Different areas throughout the states, and they come in and help us present and bring their expertise with helping with our youth during the summit.
So with the facilitating each morning, I mean, we do we did is we did our grounding and connection. And after our smudging, we did our grounding and connection. And then we all shared stories, and it's just a fun time that we did. You know, we're talking to the youth about laughing, having fun. Let's see what's on the next one. And then we got some elders, and they did a demonstration on setting up teepee, and an elder told some stories inside and some outside of the teepee. So that was one of the things, what they learned from their elders was passed down. So that was a good turnout as we had the each day going about. That was the day number one that we did the teepee setup, and day number two we took the teepees down too. So go ahead. Anything?
No, go ahead. One of the topics we hit on as well as presenting, like I mentioned, suicide prevention. And along with that, we had certified people coming in, presenters that talked about the youth mental health first aid and how that could be instrumental within their lives, within our youth. Also coming in with any of our therapists or counselors, you know, being available should any of the youth, you know, want to share any of, you know, their feelings and whatnot. So we had some of that, as long as our one of our topics too, we talked about the colonial trauma and that how we can strengthen our communities by presenting this to them and letting them know that we are here, we as the adults, to hear them and hear their voices and what are their strengths and what are their weaknesses, and helping them along with that.
And then in that last previous slide, I mean, we did our healing walk, which is one of our offering that our indigenous people do, native people do. You know, you have to set tobacco down in order. So we did a healing walk, and it was a great outcome. The kids enjoyed it, and they took some pouches, put tobaccos in it, and then did healing walks. And then in this slide right here, we brought in some elders that talked about the Shoshone ancestral food, that the plant that grows here that they produce into food. So we kind of like reintroduced those to let them know that what were their native foods around here. So anything like that, Celeste?
Oh, yeah, and how they can begin to go, and it's always like within our tribal people a ceremony. You don't just go out there, you know, out to the mountains or where have you, whatever to grab these and pick. There's always ceremony within that, and teaching this to our youth so they can know, you know, how to use this food, how to prepare it and what it's for. And, you know, some of it is, you know, part of the healing process within them, and teaching them to carry that on within themselves, be it with their children, their future children, their future grandchildren, even within their families of today.
Right there, we are doing our healing walk, teaching. We talked about the sacred tobacco, so they did their offering, and we did about half a mile, so around the perimeter of the campus. So, and a lot of the kids learned about the tobacco. So, and we just shared stories and what prevention is like, including your culture. So.
Yeah, and also with that, with the youth learning that this is a time for them, part of their self-healing, and letting them walk, you know, enjoy that fresh air, and maybe clear their minds, and, you know, letting go of any hardships, or, you know, to help them through. We also really work on with them the exercising of their mind, soul, and bodies, and this is part of one of the big activities we had. You know, we just all walked, you know, at our own paces. And when the last one was done, that's when we were all done. So this is, you know, of course, being the youth, things like this, they really enjoy the outdoors. So we try to incorporate a lot of the activities outdoors for them because, you know, they're physically active, all, you know, always. And just making that connection with their peers, and even we as the adults walking along with them, letting them know that we are there for them, we are there to listen, we are there for to advise any help they ask for and any help that we see that they may need.
And that's like we circled up. Well, every morning we circle up and talk about wellness, native wellness, and healthy relationship, the trauma, the strengthened community connection. So, in this slide right here, we all form a circle, and then we talked about what we had done and how we're feeling, and in this circle we talk about, you know, where you're connected spiritually, mentally, physically, emotionally. So, you know, in that circle, that's what we express. How are we feeling in right now? So a lot of the kids, they got to learn how to express themselves about their feelings. So of what they experienced, what the 2 day. This was the last day when we circled up. So that was in the picture.
Yeah, and leaving us all, you know, with good feelings, knowing that working through some of the hardships through these last couple days, and like I said, making the new connections, making the new friends,
Is that the last slide?
and that's what we really find the gift giving and the honoring there with our community and elders that attended.
Right there in that slide, right? Gift giving. Us Native people, you know, we do talk about gratitude. You know how we do offering to Mother Earth. That's what we talked about. Taught the kids that, and that slide right there. I'm passing out the sweetgrass, which is one of our ceremonial uh, item that we honor with using as smudging. So I was passing those out to the people that attended in the community. So.
And we at the end, we'd also like to thank a lot of our planning committee. This is one of them. She drew the picture that we put on the t-shirts for the youth, the youth that we handed, every participant, youth and the adults had received a t-shirt. And in the beginning of this slide, you can see the picture there is what her name is, Alexandria Watt, and she was also on our planning committee. But, you know, we thanked everybody for their honorings, their teaching, the wisdom. And real quick, we could go to the front of the slide just to contribute and share and acknowledge Allie for the picture on the t-shirts that were given out. It's of our mountains and one of our sacred items is sweetgrass right there. It's all in the black and white, the circle, and that's what she drew.
I think that concludes our presentation today. So thank you again.
Yes, and hope we enjoy the rest of the town hall
And may
presentations.
we all have beauty around us.
Thank you, Phil and Celeste, for sharing your cultural traditions. I especially enjoyed the storytelling and the healing walk. Thank you so much for that. And next, we will have our gallery tour is Equitable Counseling and Consulting. Please join me in welcoming founder and sole counselor, Gabrielle Davis. Her consulting firm is in Idaho. So thank you so much, Gabrielle, for joining us.
Thank you. Okay, you can go to the next slide. Levon did the work for me on that slide. the mission and vision behind Equitable is pretty simple overall, and it's to serve prioritize Black, Brown, Indigenous, and queer people in states where they might not have those same services. Equitable counseling and consulting was truly made with the community in mind. The name was picked by a poll from the community that I would be serving. Community members helped me when I first got started and help with websites and advertising and all those things to make it really, really low cost. And so it's really important to me to have a practice for the community. So much so that Equitable is actually only part-time. And it's part-time because most of my sessions are, with the exception of one person right now, are pro bono and sliding scale. So I'll be able to serve the way I wanted to serve versus a way I needed to serve to make it sustainable. Next slide. Some of the non-traditional practices, you can click all of these in here, that Equitable practices in comparison to other therapy sites or therapists overall. Therapist accountability is super important to me. That means that most therapists and medical professionals overall may have a late policy or a missed session policy where they have to pay, and I have one too. However, I am also involved in that, and so if I miss one or if I'm late, they get a discount or they get something free from me. One session gender affirmation care letters. This is really important, especially with so many anti-trans laws being passed in the Pacific Northwest. And so that looks like if a person is attempting to receive gender affirming care with a clinician or with a surgeon, I am willing to write those letters in one session versus forcing them to come for 6 months like other therapists do. Again, I have tons of pro bono sessions. They are all used up at the moment, but again, only pro bono and sliding scale. Every blue moon, I get donations from different groups that cover these, but no one is turned down for their inability to pay. The only time they're turned down is if I'm out of space. Bartering is a thing. I think, in Black community, we barter all the time. And so if some services are appropriate and are not crossing or breaking any laws, I will participate in bartering. Alternative cost options. There are several, ways you can pay. And I'll talk about this a little bit later. One of them is a trust-based sliding scale versus a sliding scale based on poverty guidelines, because the poverty guidelines are also based in cishet white supremacy and cannot take cultural context when making them. And then community-focused education. The school I went to for my counseling degree, I had all white teachers, and the therapy field overall and the tests we have to pass are based on remembering what old white man said what. And because that was the main portion of my education, I made it a point that when I graduated to receive education from Black and Brown people and use the money I initially made for that. And so any additional training I've had to help me decolonize my practice have came from Black, Brown, and Indigenous people. Any additional treatment modalities, including brain spotting and EMDR, have also been taught to me by Black, Brown, and Indigenous people. And so, since I opened in 2020, I haven't spent any money on further my education unless they were Black, Brown, Indigenous, or queer. Next slide. So the trust-based sliding scale that I mentioned before, and so what this looks like overall, usually if you use a sliding scale, there are documents you have to fill out and maybe some paperwork you have to turn in, including a pay stub or a social security statement. But in this case, I have a range of fees that they can pay, and the person will just choose what they can pay, and that would be it. And and then once I run out of that fee, then they will have to pick another fee. And that's just so I won't be upside down. Oftentimes, a couple of my clients actually got after me because they forgot that they were paying a low fee and wanted to pay a higher fee, but they just forgot because it was automatic. And so they are the ones that, encourage me to increase it from time to time. And then a super bill is something I can provide to those of us who have insurance, but I don't accept insurance, which we'll talk about here soon, but I can provide a super bill to anybody who needs it if they are trying to recover some money from work. Some places have their employer pays directly or through the healthcare insurance that they have. Next slide. And so how to find what to ask and red flags. Next slide. All these are in, you can go to the next slide here. All these are important things to know and are not put out there for us to know. We have to dig for them. And so one of the major needs to know is that myself and there's a lot of other therapists that don't accept insurance, and for many reasons. A lot of times the therapists who are Black, Brown, and Indigenous may not accept insurance for safety reasons. So one of the things is, and this is true for take this forward with a physician, if you will. If you go into any place and use your insurance, they're required to give you a diagnosis in the first visit. And so that means that we have a session, our first session is an hour, I have to present you with a label in order for me to get paid. And I don't like doing that. So I legally, I can provide a diagnosis, but it is not required. And I often only provide it when I'm writing letters for gender affirmation care, because it's less likely to get rejected if I have a diagnosis there. If somebody requests a diagnosis, but there are folks that want one or feel like they need a label, we look at the DSM together. I'll give them my opinions, and then I also provide them with a copy of the DSM so they can be as knowledgeable as they need to be. Also, diagnoses can follow you. This is especially true for people with minoritized identities and can come up and benefit you negatively in the future. And so that could mean different jobs you may want to have, life insurance, all of those things can be impacted by having a label. And then the insurance company can audit my records at any time. And while I don't mind my records being audited, I want to protect the person I'm working with as much as I can. So, even, and that's not required if I don't accept insurance. Even though I don't accept insurance, I still write notes as if I'm going to be subpoenaed or the insurance company will action them. So I'll do whatever I can to make it safe for the client. I have gotten pushback from other therapists about not the things I'm doing, but the things that I'm sharing with everyone else. And so for that reason, I continue to share those things so everyone else. You can find these things right in the open on my website. Next slide. So here's a few, misconceptions about mental health, and this is especially for Black, Brown, Indigenous, and queer people. Having a mental health issue is not a flaw, and asking for help just means that you are human and you've come to terms with it. The percentage of people talking about mental health issues right now has not changed over time. It's just went up that people are saying things out loud, right? There's nothing wrong with taking medications. You make the best decision that is for you. And mental health issues are not always tied to substance use issues. They're not tied to, this is the reason why I'm experiencing houselessness or any crime. So all those myths that said that one has to be tied to another are not necessarily true. There's usually help for almost everything. And I do want to acknowledge that the field of therapy makes it hard to navigate, but I do want to encourage folks not to give up. Next slide. And so overcoming some of the stigma of receiving mental health support, it is not true that you have to go every week or twice a week. This is something that you and your therapist should talk about to come up with a frequency that's best for you. And even though the therapist suggested, you do not have to go with what the therapist is saying. It's different if you're mandated. There are some different things if it's like court mandated or, for some other reason, but they don't get to decide what is best for you. They are just giving you suggestions. You don't have to start by talking to your childhood. There are certain modalities, and I guess most of the modalities used in therapy are based on cishet white supremacy because they were created by old, theorists that are now deceased, but also was based on white supremacy. And so you don't necessarily have to talk about your childhood, although a lot of things will point back to it. You get to shop around for therapists. If you don't like the first one, go on to the next one. It is okay to ghost therapists. You can ghost us. You can, send us an email saying I'm all done or I don't need any more sessions. But it is not a requirement that you set a session, you pay for a session to tell them that you're leaving. You can do that by email. And then if your boss will know, if you are using something like EAP, that is not connected directly to your boss. It's against the law for them to share who used the services. So EAP is Employee Assistance Program, and a lot of organizations utilize this service to provide a certain number of sessions per issue per year for employees. Next slide. So here's some ways to find some therapists. I think that's go to the next slide here. And so this link, and I'm going to drop this link in the chat also. But a lot of times if you Google therapist and you're saying something, maybe you're saying Latina therapist, usually a group of white people will show up from Psychology Today. And while that's a popular website and they have a lot of search engine optimization work, there are other ways to find people with the identities that you want to work with. It's never wrong asking for specific identities that you want to work with. Here, the acronym LEO stands for Lived Experience Only. So NQTTCN, that's the National Queer and Trans Therapy of Color Network. Only people that are queer and are melanated are allowed to list their services there. Inclusive therapists, they have a rigorous process for being listed there as well, but you can say like, hey, I want a cis man, I want a Black person, I want a queer person. You can say all those things that you want in your request. Some of these other ones are pretty self-explanatory. The Christian Closet is all made up of folks with deep religious backgrounds who have lived experiences of being queer, and the same thing for LGBTQ psychiatrists. The Trevor Project is an overall resource for queer people. They have lots of resources there, specifically for Black, Brown, and Indigenous people. And T4BG is therapy for Black girls, and T4BM is therapy for Black men. And they do not list sexuality or gender, although you might find it in their written bios. Next slide. And asking the hard questions, there's nothing wrong with it. I think we've been told that you can't ask these questions to folks who appear in a hierarchy. And oftentimes we look at therapists and other mental health professionals in a hierarchy form. But I encourage you to ask those hard questions. Who did you vote for? I will ask them about white privilege, white supremacy, thoughts on Black Lives Matter. I will ask all these things. The worst you can get is a no. If they don't answer or they choose not to or feel like, I don't think I can answer that, that's still an answer. It's still a response. And if they choose not to respond to anything, that's all an answer, because no response is a response. Other things to ask, what have they done to decolonize their practice? Against therapy fields are based in old ideas and thoughts, some of them still relevant, but the system was created for and by cishet Christian white men. Ask about age range. You can ask like, hey, I want a therapist over 50, or I want a therapist under 50. It sounds odd and, maybe not standard, but we are here to challenge the standard. And ask what they mean by sliding scale. And finally, on this slide, I would mention, if you are going to a therapist, especially in the Pacific Northwest and predominantly white spaces, I would ask you or encourage you to ask that person what they've done to support people of global majority, or queer folks overall. Next slide. Okay. And then there's my contact information. Feel free to reach out if I can support you in the future, or if you have additional questions outside of this panel.
All right, Gabrielle, wow. Gabrielle, I must say, I truly appreciate and love your non-traditional practices that you shared with us today, and then how you knew for yourself to move beyond the white supremacist education you received to add some more information into your learning and into your training to share your work with the
Thank
rest
you,
of
Lisa.
the
Thank you,
world.
Lisa.
Oh, you are so
Thank
welcome,
you.
Gabrielle. Thank you for that, really. So again, Gabrielle, thank you. Great job. The next program on our gallery tour is Deaf Overcoming Violence Through Empowerment, or DOVE, of Denver, Colorado. Please join me in welcoming Maja Posner, Community Empowerment Advocate. Thank you, Maja, and welcome.
Hello, everyone, and good morning. Also, good afternoon to those of you who are in the afternoon at this point. Okay, I'm just going to move my captions out of the way so that I can see the interpreter better. Again, my name is Marja Posner. This is my sign name. And I'll be talking to you a little bit about sign names later on in this presentation. My role is with Dove. I'm an empowerment advocate, and I focus on community engagement and partnership, engaging with different organizations to develop relationships within the community, as well as with different organizational partnerships that we have. We recently had a large project, which we are currently working with CDPHE, which stands for Polo Mental Health and Mental Health and Environment. Again, CDPHE. Public health is not mental health. We recognize that domestic violence is a public health issue. And we work closely with the agency. And so what collectively we do at Dove is we work statewide. We are a statewide agency. We don't serve only Denver. We, again, are statewide. So we only have 5 staff members. We also have different roles. My role, obviously, is community engagement. And we also have different advocates who focus on, for example, one advocate focuses on the Survivor Resiliency Program, or SRP as we call it. And basically the SRP is for survivors that when they leave a relationship or an abusive relationship and don't know what to do going forward with their life skills, coping skills, and therapeutic skills, we provide resources through our group. We have group sessions, workshops, and also we partner with NDT, the National Deaf Therapy Center, NDT, or rather National Deaf Therapy. We provide survivors with approximately 2 free sessions a month. And that's a really nice benefit for the survivors we work with to use, because most of them really don't have insurance, or they don't have much money or financial resources for a copay. So we provide that 2 free services per month. Additionally, we have resources and a directory person, an advocate who will focus on finding various resources throughout our community. We can give those resources over to survivors. And also, what we also do is we go to shelters and see which of them look like they need certain improvements with accommodations that they provide, whether they be physical, visual, auditory, or something else. Our organization only serves deaf and hard of hearing, deaf blind, and deaf disabled individuals, as well as CODAs, which refer to children of deaf adults. We serve CODAs because typically hearing children of deaf adults already have the language of ASL and the deaf culture background from the home. So they are identified as also being members of the deaf community, even though they can hear. So we look at their identity first and the culture second. We serve a wide range of ages, regardless of sexual orientation, regardless of race, regardless of religion, financial status. All of our services are free. We also provide technical assistance to anyone who would like to know more information about our organization or any organization's resources. We also provide trainings. So for example, effective communication practices and how to work with deaf survivors, as well as how to use interpreters and provide interpreters. We also have the ADA kit, which is essentially for shelters. If they have a deaf victim who enters the shelter who does not have accommodations, for example, a strobe light for alarms, a vibrating alarm, a bed shaker alarm, those types of equipment, we loan those to shelters for approximately 30 days, or however long it is that the survivor stays there. They'll sign an agreement and we loan them the kit. We also can loan to our survivors an iPad for making phone calls through video phone. There's an app installed on the iPad that they're able to use for phone call access, and they can use it privately. And let's say their phone isn't working anymore, they could also go to the shop to use the Wi-Fi and make a call. So again, we can loan them the iPad technology for 30 days or however long the person needs to use it for. Again, they would sign it out and then they have to return it when they're finished. We also do community education and outreach. So we will go to different community events. We'll host tables there. We'll provide training and education. And we're also involved with many committees, workshops, and groups so that we could best disseminate our services. Now, the deaf community is not a one-size-fits-all monolith. There are a wide range of diverse people within the community. Some communicate in sign language, some communicate with spoken language. Some people would rather use a combination of both. There are some who do not know sign language and they don't have access to spoken language. So there are a variety of people within the community who are deaf. And we serve all of them, regardless of their language or any intersectional background they may have or their educational level. Because different individuals have had different experiences with education growing up, whether their parents taught them sign, that all may look different. So in the state of Colorado, we have approximately 175,000 people who identify as deaf, hard of hearing, or deafblind. And we're not sure if that's an accurate number or not. That's just an estimation from prior information from 2012. So of course, obviously that information is outdated, but that gives us a general idea. The number may be larger at this point now, or it may have even become smaller, especially because of COVID. In the deaf community, we typically experience 1.5 times more trauma and violence. Now, this number could actually be higher, but again, we estimate 1.5% because there are different factors that we identify. Language deprivation, for one. There are deaf people who are raised not having access to their language, access to communication, and that becomes a very large barrier for them to be able to express their needs and wants. So sometimes when people experience language deprivation, they don't know how to indicate to someone, I've experienced domestic violence or sexual assault. There are also people who go to residential schools for the deaf. And so their community can be very insular, very small, a very connected group of students who all go to residential school together. So typically they all know each other very well, because approximately, I would say on average, 100 or fewer, or maybe more students are there per deaf school. And the graduate level is also much smaller as well. So the reporting on, let's say, their classmates or whomever is much lower because of the fear that people will find out it's them and this happened to them. So the number may actually be higher because of that fact. We also see a lot of financial abuse, particularly from, for example, parents who have deaf children. What they do is they collect the child's Social Security or Medicare, Medicaid, or food stamps. And what they'll do is they'll hold on to those and not pass it along to the individual or to the deaf child. So the deaf child doesn't realize that that's actually something they have access to, and it's supposed to be for them. Again, because the parents hold it back and they don't educate them about that. So we frequently see this type of financial abuse within the community. There are a number of different things that we see as well. One thing we'd like to talk about are some common themes that we typically see and how deaf people want to avoid looking for help. So for example, when calling 911, that is a very large barrier that we see with deaf survivors, because most of the time when we call 911, we have to call through a relay service. And oftentimes the person who answers the call doesn't understand what a relay service is. They think it might be someone who's calling in to scam them, or is someone who's a solicitor, someone who's selling something. And of course, they don't want anything to do with it, so they'll hang up on the relay service. That does not give us the opportunity to say, hello, I'm a deaf person calling to you through relay, and I would like to make a phone call. So that way, this is something that continues to happen, and it's a traumatizing experience for people, particularly for deaf people in general. So we avoid making phone calls in that way. And that's why when we encourage our survivors to make 911 calls, often they say they don't want to, because again, they think that if they make the call to 911, the operator will hang up on them and not identify it as being an emergency. Also, oftentimes with 911 calls, once they're complete and an officer arrives on the scene, they do not bring a sign language interpreter with them. And typically what they will do is rely on the hearing person in the room to provide interpretation services. And especially if that person is the abuser, most times they're not a safe person for the victim, and the victim will then be scared to communicate through this partner that they are in fact the abuser, because they don't want their abuser to interpret for them. And that's actually against the law. They are required to have an interpreter for deaf victims and not use anyone else in the home for interpretation. That's something we very commonly see. And we encourage deaf survivors to ask, when making the call to 911, to bring an interpreter with the officer, but often they are declined. The same thing happens with counseling. When we encourage people to make therapy sessions, we know that they go through a lot of trauma, because that's a place for them to express themselves in the healthiest way possible. But oftentimes, they don't want to look for a therapist because of two reasons. Most often what we see is, first of all, therapists don't know how to engage with deaf individuals. They're not well versed in the culture of deaf people, and they're not experienced signers. And also, the provider may know someone from outside, or the provider knows, let's say, the survivor from another context, if they are of the community themselves. So that might be scary for a survivor to open up to this particular practitioner, because if they go to that person, they might worry that the information about them will get out. This is what we see most frequently. Also, deaf people also believe that they have to protect other deaf people. That's where we most often see, for example, there may be a deaf person who is very well respected in the deaf community. Let's say they're a principal of a school for the deaf, or let's say this person is in fact the abuser of another individual who is deaf, and that deaf individual wants to make a report against this principal. They won't do it because they don't want to make that individual out to be a bad person. And at the same time, the survivor looks bad as well for making a complaint against this particular well-respected individual. That's a big barrier we often see in the deaf community. Next, we'll talk about engaging and tips for working with deaf survivors. To be honest with you, what you can do is just ask a person, number one, how do you prefer to communicate? Because again, everyone's communication method looks different. A person may use spoken language while another individual would rather using sign language. My own personal preference is that I would rather use ASL because it's my first language. I can use spoken language, but ASL is my preference because, again, it is my first language. So that's number one. Ask a person how they prefer to communicate. And then you can continue to engage with that individual. You also want to make sure that you make eye contact with the individual. You don't want to look away from them, or you don't want to say to the interpreter, tell them. You want to talk to the deaf person directly, and the interpreter will handle the interpretation part. You just want to speak to the survivor naturally. And the whole point of this, at least on my part, is communication is so crucial. Regardless of if you're working with a survivor, you want to make sure that you identify their language preferences and make sure that you are using trauma-informed language when working with a survivor. Because if you don't, they will not want to work with you typically. Now I have to wrap up my part, so I will now turn it back over to you.
Levon,
Levon, your microphone's off.
I got it. The message came up. One moment I'm not muted, and now I am. But anyway, thank you all for hanging in there with us. We are moving along. And again, Maja, we thank you so much for that awesome presentation and the informative information. Thank you. And next, we are pleased to welcome Antoinette Lopez and Odelis Avila from the Voices Jackson Hole Latina Empowerment Circle. So welcome.
Hi, everyone. I am Odalis Avila, and yes, I'm here with Antoinette Lopez. Together, we have created a program in Jackson, Wyoming called the Latina Empowerment Circle. And let me share my slides. Oh, there they are. Perfect. Like I said, some of the work we do is trying to break some of the barriers to access health and human services in our area by empowering Latina women through education and advocacy. I, Odell Sevilla, work for Voices JH, an organization that is dedicated to empowering and engaging with the immigrant community. And I'll give Antoinette a second to introduce herself.
Yeah, hi everyone. So my name is Antoinette Lopez. I am one of the very few bilingual mental health therapists in the state of Wyoming, and I mainly work with the Latino population or Latina population and many other communities as well. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Can we go to the next slide? Like I mentioned, we're located in Jackson, Wyoming. Our work is centered around this community and the surrounding valleys, because we are still considered a rural area. Jackson Hole is notoriously known for its proximity to Grand Teton and Yellowstone National Parks, and also for its enormously large wealth gap. Next. The Latina Empowerment Circle was born from the needs identified from 2 community surveys. These surveys reveal that Latina women are more likely to have increased numbers of intimate partner relationships, but also Latina women in our area have increased numbers of intimate partner violence. Next. Those findings are what led us to create a program that would aim to increase social connectedness, expand awareness of support and resources, and create a deepened understanding of cultural barriers such as stigma that prevent access to health and human services. Next. The program was an adaptation of the 11-week program by Catherine Fuchel's Si Yo Puedo curriculum. We converted that into a 9-week curriculum to better fit the time needs of our participants. And later in this presentation, we will go into more details of the curriculum. Next. In order to deliver material that was consistent, culture specific, and entirely in Spanish, we used a review panel made up of Latina family and mental health professionals. They analyzed the content for any stereotype or stigma that could cause any harm. Next. Our success was built on a strong collaboration with invested local organizations. Next. As you can see here is a list of health and human service agencies that played a role in supporting this initiative. Next. We are also very grateful for these 3 grants as they have continuously supported us through it's now in its year 3, and they have helped cover all costs. Next. To ensure accessibility and effectiveness, we included key elements like scheduling during non-traditional hours, having Latina facilitators lead all sessions, providing free childcare, and offering dinner at each session. Next. Here are some of the facilitators that have generously contributed their time and energy into our program. As you can see here, Antoinette and I have been part of this program in its 3 years of life. Next. The way we selected participants was with priority given to Latinas who were experiencing social isolation and through referrals from participating agencies. We have had a total of 25 participants and 19 have successfully graduated our program by meeting 75% of attendance that is required to graduate. Our program is targeted towards 18 plus years of age due to the nature of our conversations. Although we have noticed that anytime we have a participant that is under 21, they have a difficult time relating to experiences since our group is mostly made up of parenting women identifying Latinas in their 30s. Next. We asked participants to set personal goals at the start of every program, and these are some of the goals that they've expressed. Most of them are centered around improving relationships, self-esteem, and becoming a better parent. Next. And I'll let Antoinette take it from here.
Yeah, so as a mental health therapist, I was invited in the past 2 years to talk about a few of the topics that I'm gonna present today. And one of them is identity and self-esteem. And I believe this was the first class ever. And so together in this class, we evaluated and explored their identities. Sometimes their moms, their daughters, their sisters, but sometimes I like to go really in depth about identity. So we recognize their value, the importance of connecting a relationship with themselves, building a healthy and balanced self-esteem as well. Next. In another session, another class, I talked about life force. What makes them wake up each morning? What do they do to work on themselves and make money? Most of them, as we mentioned, their moms and their daughters. So their family, it's a really big component in the Latino culture. So for them, most of them, they just talk about their families and how they sometimes want to support families in their home country. But we talked a lot about self-care in these three aspects of the human lifespan, right? Like body, relationships, and self. So in this session, they learn how take care of their body by their sleep time, by emotions, by their eating style, by exercise and hygiene. Like how could they improve this type of self-care? Also relationships. Many of these women come and separate themselves from their home country families and friends. So it's a little bit hard with the language barrier to take initiative and grow in relationships in the US. So we touch base about the difficulties of building relationships, but how can we learn to take initiative to grow ourselves, our relationships, and attain value and connection? And lastly, we talked about self and how to reinforce this self relationship with the unconsciousness through writing, self-patience, and love. And also learning that self-care, it's an investment time for themselves. Next. Again, as a mental health therapist, I talked a lot about trauma, so cannot leave this one behind on our classes, as many of them might live experiences that might not have the name trauma next to it, but they're still unpleasant and very difficult situations that they could have lived in their home country. So in this session, we find the healing part to their soul and emotional bounds. So we recognize how their body reacts through traumas, emphasizing or focusing on these three parts on themselves: mind, will, and emotions, knowing that our mind is the hardcore of our body and holds a lot of memories and situations and a lot of stuffs and thoughts and carries a lot of things. So how mind could be maybe influenced through trauma, or how actually trauma it's influenced our minds and also our wills as well and emotions. So we talked a lot about generational trauma and again, reinforcing self-patience, love, and trust. Next. On another class, we talked about coping skills. First of all, identifying what are their most common stressors and projects in life, recognizing their narrative and the story that they tell to themselves about current or past hard situations. And so some of the strategies that I implement in this class was self-talk and restoring hope, and know the tools that they could use to face their battles, such as taking responsibility for some of the actions or actually making decisions to distance themselves from the person who hurt them before. Also having in mind that the adult is in charge and not maybe that teenager who was vulnerable and went through those difficult stuff. Emotional intelligence, self-control through words and communication. So as you can see, I teach a lot of like the way that they talk to themselves and the importance of their self-narrative. Next. In another session, we also talk about dating in healthy relationships, reflecting on their first relationship ever. How are their values, their style, their personality, their age, and talk and write what has changed over the years. Relationships could be very hard, and especially with very low education or boundaries could change over the years. So kind of like evaluating the love and support that they need at this moment or on hard situations, and especially what kind of love they could give to others as well. Next. We touch base on the power and control wheel to identify the power and control in gender roles in relationships. And so we were able to create a safe space to share experiences and also learn from each other. Next. On another session, many, like we said, many of them were moms, so they wanted to talk about how can they talk to their children. So I emphasize the development of creating a healthy relationship with their children, emphasizing the values of respect, communication, especially talking about love, puberty, sex, and consent. Also normalizing the stress that brings to be a parent and having an age-appropriate communication when they're talking to the children, setting rules and boundaries, and also having some journal about their strengths and accomplishments as parents. Next.
Awesome. Thank you, Antoinette, for that. I'll take it from here. In this session, we explore how cultural concepts like familialism, machismo, and Marianismo directly influence gender roles imposed on us within our families and communities. We also try to understand these ideologies and their origins to help participants challenge what it means to be a good daughter, wife, mother, and adopt healthier perspectives. I feel like this is a session that also helps participants discover how society helps perpetuate these stereotypes. Next. And right after that session, we move on to sexuality, consent, and women's health, as we start unpacking the ways people traditionally learn about sexual education, which often leaves many gaps in understanding. Our goal with this is to provide clear, accurate information, but also to start normalizing these conversations around sexual health so that women feel empowered to continue the conversation outside of the circle. Next. With sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression, it was included in our curriculum, but it was added per participant request. With this, we didn't really go into too much about talking about orientation as much as exploring all relationship types and challenging bias around that. We also focused the conversation around experiences of the body and dysmorphia, and normalize that to some degree. We all experience moments where our bodies don't quite align with how we feel or how we see ourselves, and that disconnection can lead to feelings of discomfort or even distress. And we explore how these feelings we'll explore how we react to these feelings and how they relate to cultural and societal expectations. Next. Some of the things that we've observed from our program is increased promotion of education on key issues like domestic violence and healthy relationships, as well as an enhanced social connectedness and resource sharing between participants. Next. As you can see here, that social connection is being led by the participants. None of the gatherings in these images are organized by the program. Next. We also have a clear impact from our program that 100% of the participants would recommend it to others and would participate again. They also emphasize the importance of having the program entirely in Spanish with daycare and food provided. Next. As we move forward, Voices JH has stepped back and has allowed Community Safety Network and Teton County Health Department to take the lead in continuing this important work. That is all we have for today. We will just leave you guys here with these graphs showing the overall impact from the program as assessed through pre and post program evaluations the participants have filled out. Thank you.
Thank you, Antoinette and Odellis. That was really great, as specifically hearing about it from a culturally specific program. And so I will be probably reaching out to you all at some point to view your slides again. So thank you so much for that. And now we have a chance to hear from all of our speakers together for a panel discussion. I'm pleased to turn the floor over to Virginia Perez-Ortega, who will moderate our panel. Virginia is the Director of Community Connections on Equity and Inclusion of the New Mexico Coalition on Sexual Assault Programs. Welcome, Virginia. Welcome. I can't wait to hear the panel all together.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I have the privilege and honor to facilitate this panel. We have about 27 minutes for you all to address the questions that I'm about to ask. But I am so incredibly happy and impressed, and I'm pretty sure everyone else in the Zoom meeting has been like trying to process everything, all of the wealth of information and the ideas and the light bulbs that went on in our head as we listened to you all. So we have prepared a few questions, and the one that I would like to start with for you all is what's something specific about this mountain region area, whether it's the climate, the geography, the politics, history, art, demographics, and anything that is included in this region. What is something specific about this area that other areas of the nation don't navigate? What are some of the things, maybe what are some of the strategies and approaches that are very, very important and unique to this area? Whoever wants to start answering, it's your turn.
I'll go.
Go ahead.
Hi, again, this is Marja. I'd like to respond. Well,
ahead.
for Colorado specifically, not necessarily for the mountain area, but for Colorado specifically, we do have free rural interpreting program, which is very important for our rural and mountain area folks, because we recognize both the mountain area and other parts of Colorado really need interpreting services, and they don't typically have access in those areas. It'll take a few hours for an interpreter to finally arrive on site, or otherwise VRI services would have to be used, which refers to video remote interpreting. For VRI, we've noticed that there's been a very large change since COVID in its use. Prior to COVID, interpreters would work in person on site. And then a big challenge of the pandemic was that all of a sudden, the rural interpreter program was developed, not because of COVID in particular, but just because of it happened in parallel. And then VRI just skyrocketed after the pandemic, which is nice for our rural area to have interpreters working remotely, but they can also be here in the Denver area. So let's say the person lives 5 hours away from Denver, they're still able to use interpreting services remotely through VRI.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I think that is amazing. Odalis, Antoinette, Phil, Celeste, Gabrielle.
I'll go. Yeah, I'll say one of the biggest barriers overall is not being able to have access to Black, Brown, and Indigenous therapists easy. I think when I was licensed, there were 16 Black therapists in the state of Idaho. And and prior to being licensed, when I was looking for a therapist, it took me several years to find one because the Black community is so small, and I knew all of the other ones. And so I became a therapist out of spite because of that, because I couldn't find what I needed. But in trying to bridge that gap and create not create more clinicians, but learn about more clinicians, I'd ask people living in other states to get licensed in the state of Idaho. So we had more to choose from, especially because this happened right after George Floyd was murdered, and so access to talk about feelings around George Floyd being murdered with white therapists may look a lot different. So I would say access to therapists that have melanin.
Thank you. Thank you. I can totally attest to that. Going through some search for a therapist who understands your culture and your wishes. It's definitely understandable. Thank you so much. So I'm glad you exist and you created that amazing program. I was getting chills when I heard your presentation because it's totally relatable for multiple people in the room and for us who are embodying, someone who is from a marginalized community. So thank you. Odalis and Antoinette, is there anything specific in the area that is unique to the population that you worked with?
Yeah, I think it's been mentioned before already that mountain towns tend to be very rurally isolated, and it's challenging to leave here if you don't have a vehicle. And if you do have a vehicle, you have to have the ability to drive at least an hour. So if we don't have any service provided in our community, people have to travel long distances. And I think along with that is that I think our social circles tend to be incredibly homogenous and tightly knit. I think that either you fit into one of two categories, which is Old West cowboy culture, or an extreme outdoor enthusiast, which you like skiing, climbing, hiking, which unfortunately have not been traditionally very welcoming spaces to Latina women or BIPOC. So I think the lack of diversity also creates rural isolation. I think that's why the Latina Empowerment Circle and many other programs are being created, because there is no easy way of solving this isolation.
Absolutely. Thank you. I really love everything that you share about your program and that safe space that I can feel already that you create for those women, and listening to them and incorporating Antoinette's expertise as a therapist and combining all of that and making it work. I really admire that, and thank you for it, because obviously being a Mexicana norteña, I would feel like I'll be sending people to you and feeling welcome there, and happy Hispanic Heritage Month as well to you and everyone who has that in their heart or is resonating. We're in the midst of it. Antoinette, do you have anything to add or?
Yes, yeah, thank you. Just like something that I want to add to Odalis, we are young, and as we mentioned before, we serve a lot of Latina who are older than us, and they're 30 and plus, and so they have witnessed that this new generation, especially in Jackson Hole, is trying to be leaders and expand this knowledge that we witnessed as daughters and as kids when we were younger. So I think we are doing a lot, just like some of my friends, Odalis and other Latino leaders in that community. So just knowing that this generation is making an action to create Latina empowerment circles like myself being one of the first very few bilingual therapists here in Jackson, and also like creating a radio show. Like I have witnessed the, like Gabby said, like the really gap of mental health. So as a mental health therapist, I've been trying to contribute to my community in free access of mental health by creating a radio show here that also expands this knowledge about topics and stigma of mental health. So just overall saying that this generation and all of us are trying to make things different and making a change.
Thank you. Thank you. Some of you young adult Latinas have been able to do what some of us seasoned or are not able to, because we were focused on raising our kids and had to put aside a lot of our warrior endeavors and desires. But thank you. I love to see that, and I'm glad that you're leading that. And Phil and Celeste, what a wonderful presentation you all shared. I could tell, I could feel like the power on that youth summit that you did, and working with youth and reconnecting and connecting them through laugh and having fun and things like that are oftentimes, prohibited in some of the programs, or we don't get to be allowed to do that. So what is it that is unique to this area, the mountain region area, and the way that you connect with people? How what would you say?
First of all, many of you probably know we are located here in the west central side of Wyoming, the state of Wyoming. So that pretty much is the state of Wyoming, the central part of the states. And we're on the Wind River Reservation. There's predominantly two of our tribes, indigenous tribes of the Eastern Shoshone and the Northern Arapaho people, and also a lot of other tribes that reside with us here on the Wind River Reservation. And we're surrounded, we're located here in what we call the Wind River Basin. And that also includes the portions of the Wind River Range, our Owl Creek Mountains, and also our Absaroka Range Mountains. And I'll go ahead and let Phil talk about the resources and programs.
Welcome again. The barrier that we experienced here was COVID played a major role. I'm sure it played a major role in every community everywhere. So COVID, I mean, it made the youth, they weren't going to school, they weren't doing anything, pretty much they stayed at home, and then later on, they just kind of shied away from everything, and we were just scared of one another during that time, and it had our ceremonial way was put on hold. So that was the barrier that it had created. And mental health played a major role in it again. So that went on the rise. So that's one of the barriers that had created that. And then after COVID was over, still a lot of people are, the barrier that we were still having trouble with is transportation, getting people to come here, the kids, bringing them in, and everything was just being on a scare alert, but still, I mean, it was just created that much barrier, but we're overcoming it now since after COVID was done. So, we're going back to our cedering ways, we're having community cedering, and community gathering, like the powwow. So we're going to have a social powwow this coming weekend, so where we will invite elders, the whole community, the youth and their families. So that's one of the unique thing about this reservation here. So I'm a visitor. I'm an outsider I'm a different tribe, but I work with the tribe, and I I'm well known in the community, and I'm well outspoken, and I'm considered an elder too. So people come here and asking me for advice. So, and I talk about a lot of things. So it's good that we have this culture thing that is coming back, and we're beginning to enforce the ceremonial ways back in. So, there's a lot of things so unique about the Wind River Reservation here. So we have everything. All the resources are here. So that's what we have to reintroduce. And it's okay to go out there and, get your own medicine, heal your own self. Self-care, we talk about all these to overcome that mental health. We have to reconnect to Mother Earth. The resources are here, the mountains, the river, everything's here. So that's one of our main goal is doing that. So thank you again.
No, thank you. Thank you. I'm so grateful for you to remind us and throughout the presentations, that we have so much. We have so much creativity, so many tools, and we are, being super smart about navigating those systems that put barriers to us. And the next question is something that some of you have already answered, because it talks about what are some of the things that we have learned. Obviously, our worlds are shifting, right? After COVID, nothing is the same. The world as we knew has changed. So we have learned a lot during the past years and made a lot of adaptations. Some of you already mentioned some, but what are some of the major shifts that have made the biggest influence in your work? Like what are some of those major shifts that made the biggest influence in how you approach the work right now? Anyone who wants to pitch in?
I think that mainly that we're moving to mostly digital information. We now meet mostly online through Zoom because we've discovered that it is convenient, it's easy to connect and not have to leave the space you're in, but it's not easy to everyone. Not everyone has access to internet or a computer, a phone. And from that perspective, also, I feel like a lot of agencies are now like getting rid of like paper applications, paper forms, because it's convenient to them to have everything directly uploaded into their systems.
True. That is that COVID showed us, right? The ways that we can become creative and still feel connected, and especially in this vast geographic states and region, like we don't have to wait until we have that vehicle, that reliable transportation. We can still be connected. We can still talk and connect. Of course, human interaction and physical in person is important, but definitely that. I'm gonna put you on the spot, Marja. What have been? You already mentioned some of the innovations that happened with COVID and expansion of the services of the interpretation in rural areas. Is there anything that you would like to add? Like, what's the biggest influence of that in your work?
Thank you for that question. Well, for the interpreting part, for rural areas, typically we rely on the state of Colorado and the Commission of the Deaf and Hard of Hearing and Deaf Blind to operate that program. So that's where my role comes in heavily, because I work and also maintain close relationships with the state of Colorado and also with other community agencies. And also statewide. So we have to work with other domestic violence organizations all across the state. So for example, if you have a deaf survivor and the survivor lives 5 hours away from Denver, let's say in Grand Junction, we obviously, I mean, we can drive out there, but probably the survivor would rather just to immediately work with their local domestic violence organization. So we at Dove provide co-sponsoring. And basically what that looks like is, for example, a survivor can work with that particular domestic violence organization locally, whoever they may be, if that's what they would like to do. And then the survivor maybe really doesn't understand the paperwork, let's say. Very oftentimes paperwork is legal. It has very complicated jargon on it. So that's basically where we at Dove can step in and explain the paperwork and walk them through that entire process. So we can provide them that help with direct communication instead of going through an interpreter, because going through an interpreter can be more complex. So again, that's where we can provide co-sponsorship and also, or supports rather. We also ask for more funding from the state of Colorado because of inflation. The cost of living has risen, especially post-COVID. And that's another thing that we've really been looking for is additional funding in order to sustain our victim services and victims receiving services that they need in the community and even personally.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Gabby, would you like to add something? I know that you have had this incredible, innovative, non-traditional way of supporting people that really, really need it. And thanks for all the resources that you shared. What is it that that you have been able to, to shift? What is the major shift that you've had to make and the adjustment in the past few years?
Yeah, I think the biggest, I don't think it's an adjustment, but something that I guess I wasn't encouraged to use. And I would say that the power of people younger than me. I've been led by people younger than me, and a lot of changes I've made has been because people, like Antoinette mentioned, like being around younger therapists. I'm 41. And so getting to learn like what people need, because all of my professors were older than me, a lot of things, we were told it should be like this, but it had no reason, but because it's always been that way. And so being led by young people and finding younger people than me and finding new ways to do things has been incredible. The other thing I've seen, a lot of the people I serve that are over 60, I ask what made them come, and they say my grandchild encouraged me. And so we have these amazing generations doing all these amazing things. And, America specifically has been childist in a way where or not childish, but ageist, but against people that are younger, like they don't have anything to offer. And I find it to be the absolute opposite. And so, so doing things where I can, learn from younger people and make changes accordingly, has helped me, impact all age ranges. So, listening to them more, not writing it off, the things they have to offer, and partnering with them any chance I get.
I love that. And I couldn't agree more with you. I'm one of those allies to youth and young adults in any space, because they are the future. We need to be passing the torch, and I feel that spirit here in this virtual room. So thank you for highlighting that too. I'm going to ask one last question, and I will I'll leave it there because I don't want to push for time past the 5 minutes. So one of the questions that we have is, some of the organizations are saturated with systems, whether it's the legal system, the nonprofit system. We all like belong and respond and participate in systems, right? Other organizations are rooted in community, usually grassroots, and you know, those organizations are often denying any federal funding. How can this world interact in ways that supports total liberation? Like, we don't have to you know, abide to or receive or need funding that prevents us from doing the real culturally specific work that we need to do. And so the big question is, what are the role of system-based organizations in your community-based organization? What is it? What's the relationship and the role they play? Anyone can answer.
I think intentionality is important around this. I don't accept anything that's earmarked or anything else. If it's not for Black, Brown, Indigenous, and queer people, I'm not interested at all. We'll just find another way. I believe deeply in that, and I also think, you know, when saying yes to being in a space, even a space like this, knowing what is the reason for, who will benefit from showing up in these spaces, and to give away opportunities as well. If you can't do it, let's find somebody else that also has these identities that may not get opportunities, give those experiences away. Another way, if you can use a fiduciary sponsor, you know, that the money goes there and we can pull out from there without having earmarked money. I think the answer to everything is in community. And if we look a little bit further, it might take a little bit more time, might not be as pretty as we want it to be, but we can absolutely get to an answer.
Thank you. I'm glad your organization exists and organizations like you exist. Thank you. And we have time for one more answer. Marja, I saw you raising your hand.
Yes. Previously, Dove organization was a community-based organization. So we relied heavily on systemic-based organizations. For example, the court and legal systems for policy changes, and all of that impacts our survivors. And so we try to share what it is our survivors want within those policy changes. But to be honest with you, I would love to see us become fully 100% free from being system-based. But we can't, because again, we heavily rely on policy changes in order to run our organization.
Thank you for that answer, but it also sounds like that you led the way and they adopted your ways somehow, and then you're trying to make it all work. So it's like a dance, right? we get to participate under our own standards, and sometimes we're able to completely stay away from those funding or like the demanding funding that contradict our values. And I think I will pass it back to Levon, because we want to honor everybody's time, and you've been here with us for almost 2 hours. So Levon, take it away. I stole 1 minute of your time, and then we'll be on schedule.
Virginia, that is okay. You did a great job in that amount of time. Let me tell you, I am impressed. So thank you, Virginia, and thank you to all of the gallery tour organizations. You did such a great job. And from where I sit, in the amount of years I've been in this space, the work you all are doing is so vital. It is so important. And if no one has ever told you all in the work, particularly those of you who do not take funding, we need you. We need you. We need you to lead the way. We need you to continue to inform the field of different approaches and being more creative and innovative in how we too can have more non-restrictive dollars to do the work in the way that survivors are asking for, and being able to use those resources or expand those resources. So thank you to each of you. And we truly, truly appreciate you and the information that you shared with us today and giving of your time. So kudos to you all. So at this point, we would love to highlight the graphic illustration that Andre Medina, was able to capture for us today. Please note that this is not the high resolution version. I like that disclaimer. The final illustration will be available to all participants in both English and Spanish. A special thank you to all of today's presenters and to our amazing interpretation team. So we're going to go, before we close, we're going to go to our Andre's great illustrations.
It's visible on the screen, Levon. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, I see that. I thought there was going to be more. Thank you, Casey. All right. So great job. Great job. And so now, before we close, we would like to invite you on behalf of the National IPV Prevention Council to participate in our National Prevention Scan. This survey will help to capture innovative strategies to sustain prevention across the United States through creative funding and critical partnerships. We would love to include your voice and experience. And I'm sure, like me, you all could see the scan on the screen. So we would love for you to take part in our survey and scan it and send it in however, the new technology or the digital world works. So thank you for that. And for those who do participate and send us your survey, it's very important to gather that data. And now we welcome you to join us tomorrow at the same time for part 2. So please come back and bring someone else with you, okay? Of the National Prevention Town Hall. Tomorrow's gallery tour will include the Black Liberation Collective, Transgender Resource Center of New Mexico, Enlace Community Youth Leaders, and TY Women United. If you will not be attending tomorrow, please take a moment now to complete our evaluation. Thank you all so much. And please take care of yourselves and each other. So from the National Resource Center on Domestic Violence and our partners that we work with and presenters, we thank you all so much. And I thank you as well. Thank you all and have a great rest of your day.